some of the less positive aspects of what's happened. And certainly Ambassador Crocker himself talked about the lack of political progress on a national level, how political progress has not been stopped but has certainly been very slow, that needed legislation is still being negotiated, but we do have some bright spots on the horizon. I mean, it was the case that on August 26th, the communique was issued by 5 top leaders across the 3 communities in Baghdad, suggesting that there's some agreement on major pieces of legislation dealing with provincial powers and de-Baathification reform, and that this group would continue to work out their differences and work towards legislation that can be passed by the Council of Representatives now that they're back in session after their August recess. So even though they did take the month off, leaders are still working behind the scenes to continue to press on towards needed legislation. It's still very slow, it's still very tenuous, and agreement does not necessarily equate towards passed legislation, but these are certainly bright points that we can discuss. One thing that I will mention, and both the Ambassador and General Petraeus noted this yesterday, but something that you won't see in the congressional benchmarks, in the GAO report, and some of the other reports that have come over the past several weeks now. But it's the idea that political process or progress is not just seen with these small glimmers of light and hope on the national level, but really on a local bottom-up approach, where we're seeing that especially in places like Anbar and Diyala province and elsewhere, you're seeing the provincial councils meeting now on a more regular basis, that security is such that they can often operate and have the sorts of local debates, provide local services, and be responsive to the local populace more now than we saw in the last half of 2006. Some of this undoubtedly is because of the security gains that we've seen in some of these local areas. And it's something that we ought to look at more closely as we continue these local engagements. However, these local engagements do take time. It did take the Marines in Anbar upwards of 2 and 3 years to gain the trust of local tribal leaders, but now that we see that we have a small bit of progress in these areas, what we're seeing is that more tribal leaders in Diyala province, in the north and east of Baghdad, seeing that, well, if someone else in another area is able to take a stand and take a risk, maybe we can as well. So I believe that you'll see more of these sorts of engagements being successful and accelerating over time. One other issue that I think that we ought to be very concerned about and continue to engage on is this issue of Iranian meddling into the internal affairs of Iraq. Iran wants nothing more than to see us fail in Iraq. They want us to leave. They want to enter into the ensuing security vacuum, and they want to have Iraq simply be a satellite nation of Iran. And so therefore we see that their elite Quds Force operatives are in the country, according to Major General Rick Lynch, who's commander of a multinational division in Baghdad, suggests that there are perhaps dozens of operatives working in the country, providing weapons, providing training, providing the very deadly explosively formed projectiles, which represent 3 out of every 4 casualties for coalition forces. And this is an issue that we'll have to continue to work with, to arrest, detain those operatives who are trying to do us harm and trying to undermine the legitimate political activity of Iraq. One other thing I want to discuss with you that people really should take away from the hearings is that there may be a hard road ahead, but there would be an even greater disaster if we were to leave. And let me talk very briefly about the consequences of withdrawal. And Ambassador Crocker, I think, put it best. He said yesterday, "I am certain that abandoning or drastically curtailing our efforts will bring failure, and the consequences of such a failure must be clearly understood. An Iraq that falls into chaos or civil war will mean massive human suffering well beyond what has already occurred within Iraq's borders." He then concluded by saying, "The gains made against al-Qaeda and other extremist groups could easily evaporate, and they could establish strongholds used as safe havens for regional and international operations. The current course is hard. The alternatives are far worse." If we want to capitalize on the security gains, on the gains that we've seen in building up the Iraqi security forces, and on the political process that we've seen on a local level, then we must continue to see these efforts forward, and we must continue to stay and build on what we've already accomplished. And I think it's important to note that Ambassador Crocker and General Petraeus are deeply concerned about the consequences of withdrawal, on the consequences of seeing Iraq be a destabilized power, and what that means for really the Middle East region. With that,